Try to imagine a day in which everybody decides to drop everything and go off and fight a war.
The Japanese attack on U.S. forces on December 7, 1941 was a shocking and devastating assault that was tactically successful. More than 350 aircraft from 6 Imperial Japanese Navy carriers hit all 8 U.S. battleships anchored or in dry dock in Pearl Harbor on December 7th. 2 battleships were total losses, one of which was the USS Arizona. The Japanese attack began at 7:55 in the morning and lasted just 1 hour and 15 minutes. But those 75 fateful minutes were the death knell for more than 2,000 sailors that day, half of whom were aboard Arizona. Among those casualties was Rear Admiral Isaac C. Kidd, Commander, Battleship Division 1, who became the first U.S. Navy flag officer to die in combat in World War II. Both he and Arizona's commanding officer, Captain Franklin Van Valkenburg, were awarded Medals of Honor posthumously. An American flag flies above the sunken battleship, which serves as a memorial to all Americans who died in the attack. But the Arizona Memorial is not the only place the Arizona crew members who were lost are remembered.
Before the Arizona Memorial was built, what you see behind you, the relics, was actually the superstructure that was still in the water that had not been salvaged during the war. Stayed there until about 1959 or so when the memorial was being built. When they had to build the Arizona Memorial, they removed the superstructure that was existing and brought it out here. So in 1994, Congress actually authorized the Navy to have a relics program where we could take pieces, small pieces usually, of the relics and then give them to bona fide veterans organizations, museums, schools, other kinds of nonprofit organizations. Well, Naval History and Heritage Command is really the owners of the wreckage. This is Navy wreckage, so they have ownership or responsibility for any kind of Navy wreckage. So that's how they got involved. What they did is they designated Navy Region Hawaii as their agency to be the ones that distributed the pieces and kind of ran the program, but ultimately oversight is with the Naval History and Heritage Command.
Since the USS Arizona Superstructure Relic Program began, more than 150 pieces from the USS Arizona have been loaned to recipients such as museums, schools, veterans organizations, and military commands in 22 of the 50 states in Washington, D.C.
The USS Arizona Memorial Gardens was built in February of 2020. We dedicated it alongside World War II veteran Bob Aguilar, who's a member of our Salt River Indian community, and a Pearl Harbor survivor, Jack Holder. They were both here to flip the switch on this beautiful 5-acre garden space that spans the exact length and width of the USS Arizona ship herself. At night, the lights around the gardens, they illuminate, representing all of the individuals who perished aboard the ship that day. The space just comes alive at night. And that is exactly why we created what we call the individual, is what the design of this space was called. And that's why we did it that way, was to make sure that their light and their memory continues to live on for time immemorial.
These relics supply a vital link between the public and this fateful historic day by telling the story of the USS Arizona sailors' sacrifice on December 7th to generations since then and yet to come.
Well, Admiral Aquilino, the commander of the Pacific Fleet at the time, he came out and saw the relics, and he understood about the relics program, but he wanted to get pieces of those relics into the ships of the Pacific Fleet. So that's kind of the impetus for that. So the program had been around for a while, but when he saw it, he said, it's great what you're doing on a large scale, but hey, how can we get this same kind of legacy into the ships of the Pacific Fleet? So that's how that program started. And the idea is that we found a larger section that had rivets. So one way to identify that this is the USS Arizona is by those rivets. So we took a larger band that had rivets all along, cut them into 3-inch pieces, and then each one of those pieces is going to go to a ship in the U.S. Pacific Fleet. So every ship, it will be relatively uniform. You'll see some rivets, and then the idea is that the ships can put that in a prominent place where the entire crew can see it. And it's taking the legacy of the Arizona, the legacy of the crew of the USS Arizona, and the Pacific Fleet of old, and bringing it to the ships of today, so that hopefully there's that transition of legacy from the old to the new.
As a member of the USS Chung Hoon, we have a unique tie to the USS Arizona in that our namesake, Admiral Gordon Chung Hoon, was ship's company on board the USS Arizona at the time of the attack on Pearl Harbor. He wasn't on board on that morning. He was on shore leave down in Honolulu, but he was a member of the crew, and with that close connection, we carry on his legacy and the legacy of the Arizona in having the relic on board.
I think the relic itself is a symbol of the fighting spirit of the Arizona, and it's just a constant daily reminder of one, the millions of men and women that have worn the uniform of the country before us. Some of them have called themselves Chung Hoon sailors. All of them have been sailors, Marines, soldiers, airmen. Many of them have paid the ultimate sacrifice and given their life so that we can all be part of this country and this Navy.
When a member of the public visits a display of a USS Arizona relic, the visitor experiences what the relic represents. It's not just a page of text, but a physical piece of history that tells a story.
We like to compartmentalize history, especially historical events, and tell like these very kind of clean, simple stories when really it's part of this larger web that is so much more complex. And I think that especially when we have objects that we can see and use to educate about the experiences, just like we were talking about with, you know, what was it like to be a crew member on the USS Arizona? I think that just improves our understanding of history. And then from an educational standpoint, it helps us do a better job of telling the story. To quote the saying, right, that we can't know where we're going if we don't know where we've been. So it's so important that we reflect on these historical events.
When a sailor sees a display of a relic, it's a reminder of what shipmates of the past endured, what those 1941 shipmates experienced, and what sailors today may be called to do.
CBMU 303 a couple decades ago was tasked to actually fence in the area where the remains from the ship were taken and placed off on the coast. Normally I guess there's a customer that would contact historians or the curators, and we would be tasked to go out there and identify specific pieces and basically either cut those pieces down to the specific size that was requested, or take that physical piece. We would bring it back to our spaces, and from that point we would just custom create a box and ship it to the customer. I'm talking to my grandfather, who was a Marine who was in the war, and talking about Pearl Harbor and the surrounding areas, the different islands, Iwo Jima he stormed, and going back to the history, it kind of relates that to me being in the Navy now, as well as the fact that I'm a steel worker and, you know, working with this ship and making these part of history, you know, dealing with them, handling them, and being able to restore them and push them out to museums or whoever it is to display them. It's very honoring.
When a survivor or his family sees a display of a relic, it's a physical reminder of shipmates lost, of hard choices and sacrifice, and perhaps a reminder of the survivor's worst day, and maybe what transpired next that gave them hope for the future.